Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today is August 1st, 2026, and the landscape of love, the law, and splitting up has shifted in ways you really might not expect. We're going to be looking at everything from a massive celebrity breakup that quite literally just hit the wires, to some surprising data about who's actually staying together, all the way to the intense new battlegrounds happening in modern courtrooms. It's a fascinating look at the true mechanics of marriage and separation right now, so let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap. First, we'll look at a high-profile split. Second, some surprising modern divorce trends. Third, the digital asset battlefield. And finally, the brewing no-fault divorce debate. Starting things off with Section 1, a high-profile split, specifically the Griner case. Let's start by looking at the breaking news regarding a major split right out of the sports world. Irretrievably broken. That stark, pretty heavy legal phrase is pulled directly from court documents that became public just this morning. WNBA superstar Brittney Griner has officially filed for divorce from her wife, Cherelle Griner, after nearly 8 years of marriage, stating simply that the union is irretrievably broken. Now, this is a huge shock to the public. If you followed their story, you know they seemed like an absolutely unbreakable team, right? Especially when Cherelle served as that incredibly vocal and visible advocate for Brittney's release during her 10-month detention in Russia back in 2022. But as this phrase shows us, the reality behind closed doors has definitely shifted. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer complexity of untangling a modern, high-profile life. Let's walk through the specific facts of the case we have so far, just to get you up to speed. The documents list their official date of separation as just last week, July 24, 2026. In the filing, Brittney is requesting joint legal and physical custody of their son, Bash Raymond. But where this gets incredibly intricate is the financial side. The division of assets here is expected to be a massive undertaking. We're talking about negotiating substantial NBA and WNBA earnings alongside a highly lucrative endorsement portfolio. Moving right along to Section 2, surprising modern divorce trends. Taking a look at the big picture. While celebrity splits absolutely dominate our news feeds, it's time to zoom out, because the big picture in 2026 is going to challenge some of your deepest preconceived notions about American marriages. If you grew up hearing that old cliche that half of all marriages end in divorce, well, it is time to throw that mental software in the trash. Provisional data for early 2026 reveals that the U.S. divorce rate is actually sitting at a historic low of just 2.4 divorces per 1,000 people. Yeah, you heard that right. Despite what the tabloids suggest, Americans as a whole are actually staying married longer. So, what does this all mean? Why are couples sticking it out? Sociologists point directly to this upward creep in the age of first marriage. Decades ago, getting married in your early 20s was the standard. Today, Americans are heavily delaying that trip to the altar, waiting until their late 20s and early 30s to finally say I do. This extra time naturally brings a higher level of maturity, way better communication skills, and crucially, greater financial stability to the union. It turns out, waiting to get your life sorted out before tying the knot correlates strongly with much longer-lasting marriages. However, there is a major countertrend we absolutely have to talk about. While the overall numbers are dropping, one specific demographic is seeing a massive surge. And that's called the gray divorce. If you're older, this might resonate deeply. This is a surging demographic trend where couples aged 50 and older decide to split. Experts often attribute this to the empty nest effect. It's the story of couples who stayed together for decades, primarily for the sake of raising their kids. Once those kids leave home, they look at each other across the dinner table and realize they've simply grown entirely apart. Couples over the age of 55 now represent a staggering 25% of all splits. To put that into perspective, 1 in 4 modern divorces involves this older demographic. Statistically speaking, if you're over 50 right now, you are at a higher risk of divorce than your own children are. And look, these are rarely quick, clean splits. These cases require the complex untangling of decades of shared assets, joint retirement funds, and incredibly intricate estate planning. Let's move to Section 3. The digital asset battlefield in modern courtrooms. Let's see how this builds, because the mechanics of splitting up in 2026 look absolutely nothing like they did in the past. A 1980s divorce was largely about legacy, physical assets, who gets the house, who gets the minivan, how do we split the savings account? But divorce attorneys today are telling us that the 2026 courtroom is a total Wild West of digital marital property. We're talking about brutal fights over cryptocurrency wallets, NFTs, and AI-generated intellectual property. If a spouse started a highly profitable podcast or a lucrative YouTube channel during the marriage, well, that digital footprint is now squarely on the table as divisible marital property. And it's not just the assets that have gone digital, it's the evidence too.
We are seeing a massive, literally unprecedented spike in everyday technology being subpoenaed and weaponized in courtrooms to prove infidelity or argue custody. Your innocent text messages and emails? That's just the start. Did you know your smart home device data can be pulled? Or your fitness tracker history and your car's GPS logs? All of this electronic evidence is actively being used by lawyers to track exactly where a spouse was or wasn't at any given moment. It is wild. Add to that the massive gig economy complication, which creates this incredibly difficult chain reaction. Because more Americans than ever are working as freelancers or independent contractors, their income fluctuates wildly from month to month. Step 2. This creates a total forensic accounting nightmare. It's incredibly difficult for judges to calculate fixed numbers for child support or alimony when a spouse's earnings aren't consistent. Which leads to step 3. To prevent these complicated cases from dragging on and bankrupting families, attorneys are now heavily pushing for mediation and arbitration over traditional trials, just to keep those ballooning costs down. Finally, Section 4, the no-fault divorce debate, which is becoming a heated political battleground. We really need to zoom all the way out to the larger political landscape here, because the actual legal right to get a divorce is becoming surprisingly contested. Before we look at the debate, let's clearly define what is actually under threat. For decades, no-fault divorce has been an uncontroversial bedrock of family law. It simply means you can file for divorce without being forced to prove in a court of law that your spouse did something legally wrong, like committing adultery or being abusive. It basically allows people to simply walk away when a marriage is broken. So, the crucial point is understanding both sides of this massive legal shift impartially. As lawmakers in states like Louisiana, Texas, and Oklahoma introduce bills aimed at restricting or completely abolishing this no-fault bedrock. On one side, proponents of repeal argue that current laws make it entirely too easy to break a serious marital contract. They believe that reintroducing fault requirements will force couples to slow down and encourage them to work harder on reconciliation. On the flip side, critics are sounding massive alarm bells. They warn that forcing spouses to prove fault will turn relatively simple civil proceedings into nasty, drawn-out, and hugely expensive trials. Even more urgently, advocates for domestic violence survivors warn that abolishing no-fault divorce could be weaponized by abusive spouses, giving them the power to drag out proceedings and legally trap their victims in a dangerous marriage by threatening to contest a fault claim. As of today, none of these states have successfully passed a full repeal, but the national conversation is deafening. And it all leads us to a final, really provocative question. From the heartbreaking headlines of the Griners to courtroom battles over Bitcoin, all the way to your local state legislature. As the 2026 midterm elections fast approach, will the fundamental right to a no-fault divorce be on your state's ballot? It's a systemic political issue that could very directly affect your future or the future of someone you love. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this complex topic today. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will see you in the next explainer.